Hello there. My name is Steve Neal. My students call me Mr. Neal, and I am the head of student life as well as a DP business teacher at St. Jude's Academy in Ontario, Canada. My favorite teacher when I was a student was Dr. Haken, and that was because of both his incredible passion for the topics that he covered as well as just his care for students.
Hello, teachers from around the world, and welcome to another episode of the Legendary Educator podcast, the podcast for teachers where we discuss everything related to education. I'm your host, Mr. Ramos. If this is your first time tuning in, well then welcome. Really glad to have you. If you're a returning listener, thank you for investing your time. I truly appreciate it, and so will your students. I'm excited to inform you that today the podcast has reached a milestone of 10 episodes. It's been an exciting start for me, and I can't wait to continue this journey with you. To celebrate the 10th episode, today's topic is immensely beneficial for all teachers, especially teachers who are stressing out over their weaknesses, or to be perfect. My guest this week is Mr. Steve Neal, and we discuss what he calls the triangle of teaching. The triangle of teaching is a remarkable idea, and I was blown away when I first heard him talk about it, and that's why I had to get him on the podcast to explain it to everybody himself. Before we start, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of the awesome upcoming episodes. And please join the discussion and leave your comments in the new Legendary Educator Facebook group. What a pleasure it was talking to this legendary educator. Mr. Neal, welcome. Mr. Neal, thank you for coming on the podcast today. I really do appreciate your time. Before we get into today's topic, I want to get to know a little bit about your journey and how you became a teacher. So what is your origin story?
Not normal, probably for most teachers, but I actually ran my own sales and marketing company for just about 20 years. And as that was going into some transition times, my friend who runs St. Jude's Academy, he and I were having coffee, and I just looked him in the eye and said, "I've decided I'll take the job if you offer it to me," which was the beginning of a change. That kind of moved into a transition into the school situation.
How long ago was this?
That would have been, this will be my 4th year of teaching. Yep. I started just before COVID.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, what made you get into that in the first place? Why did you take the job?
It's a fairly natural fit for me. I've always taught. From the time I graduated high school, I started working with junior high kids. From all through my adult life, I do a lot of public speaking. I do a lot of that kind of stuff. Teaching is just kind of part of in my nature. Although for the majority of life, it was kind of a backseat. Now it's just a little more primary.
Well, I mean, let me ask you this. Why was it a backseat when you graduated university? Why wasn't this the first thing that you would go into?
That's funny. I don't know. I've never thought about that before. Actually, it was never on the radar, which is funny. My mom was a teacher. I've got lots of family that were teachers. Like, it would have been a natural thing, but I did slightly ponder university professor for a while when I was, in my early 20s. No, I just had a different direction I was going in, and I was happy on that road. But eventually, for one, I hit mid 40s, and I'm like, I need to do something different. And so, it fell together, I guess you could say, and it was just an easy and natural transition.
Any regrets? Do you miss the corporate world or the business world?
The corporate world is a very different world, and so would I say, do I miss it? No, but I definitely miss elements of it from time to time. Having to be at a school building from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. Monday to Friday. That's just, I've never done that in life, being in the same place every day. So that was a weird transition to get used to. And at the same time, it's just such a there is something rewarding. The grade nines that I started teaching my first year graduate this year. And so as I'm teaching 27 of them
Okay.
business, I'm like, oh man, I'm going to miss these kids. We've had 4 years together now, and you don't get that in the business world really.
No.
So like I said, there are things I miss, but no, it's a very different and very good world to be in.
Amen. Amen. I do hear you. Amen. Okay, so a while back, I attended a brief PD with you, and as we had discussed before, something that you presented really stood out to me and has always been there until today, in the back of my mind. It is, something that you call the triangle of teaching. And
Yes.
this is what I want to get into today. So, can you explain that to us? What is the triangle of teaching?
3 characteristics of a good teacher, the triangle of teaching, we call it, which looks fantastic on screen. Because it is a nice equilateral triangle. It includes being organizational, it includes being relational, and it includes being knowledgeable. And in a perfect world, we would have an equilateral triangle. That is our life of these things. But the reality of it, and why we spend a lot of time on this in PD, is because nobody's an equilateral triangle. Nobody has each of these things perfectly. And in fact, I would go so far as to say we would not want a team at our school where everybody was this perfect thing. We want the balancing act that has to happen among people. Some are incredibly organizational and incredibly relational, and they don't like to say it as teachers, but their knowledge level might actually be the lowest level for them. They don't feel like they really know their topic well, especially when you bring new teachers in and they're learning new courses, right? But we embrace that. We think that's fantastic. We have other teachers whose knowledge is fantastic. They're organizational, but they struggle on the relationship side. And we're good with that. We like that. We embrace that. We bring everybody in together so that we can together form a good community and learn from each other. And I think that's probably one of the biggest keys, is that we learn from each other in that situation. We learn how to adapt the other things. It's not like I say I'm not organizational, so I'm never going to be. Stop expecting it. My report cards will never be done on time. Don't expect that from me, right? We don't say that. We need you to grow. We need you to learn, but we don't look for perfect people. We look for exceptional people who will struggle with certain areas.
Why would you embrace a weakness? Some people would say, not being knowledgeable enough in your content is a weakness as a teacher. Not being organizational, and God knows that was my weakness when I was a teacher. All the paperwork was not my friend. But I see it as a weakness in my performance. So why would we embrace a weakness? One of these three.
Sure. Let me flip it around on you. I think you're starting from that question is starting from a false beginning, perhaps, which is to say that a weakness is bad. And I think that's where we look at it. Nobody can be exceptional in all areas. It's just, and honestly, the people where I think have maybe come the closest that I've met, I don't really want to be around them. When you embrace that we are not this perfect triangle of teachers, we allow for our exceptionalities to fly, and as a team we support the things that maybe you're less good at. I think there's often a real falseness that comes along with the image that you've got it all together. There's we say this with our students all the time because we're trying right now, but as kids come out of COVID, they're uncertain. They're not good at things that they were probably good at before COVID because they haven't practiced it properly. So in our classrooms, we are forever saying, tell the kids when you make a mistake, tell them I did that wrong.
Right.
I have students that they struggle to get their stuff in on time. And I can look at them and say, I struggle with deadlines too. But there are some deadlines you can't go beyond, so we got to sort this out. We got to get it fixed because, you leave. I've got my grade 12s leaving in a couple of months. And I've been hounding them these last few months that the grace you're getting in high school is not there in university. You've got to figure this out. Even if it's not what you're great at, you got to figure out a way to do it. And sometimes that just means working with other people, right, to make it happen. So.
Let's take this one point because that was my weakness, right? If a student submits something late, or doesn't submit it at all, it needs reminding, etc., we naturally deduct points. We, naturally give consequences. And then again, we're still saying, it's okay not to be, organizational. I mean, let's take another side of the triangle. I mean, if a student takes a test, doesn't do well on the test, we don't give, the good marks, or we deduct marks or whatever. How is it okay for a teacher to go into the classroom not as knowledgeable as we would like them to be?
So I think you have to look at that from a couple of perspectives. Let's go with the knowledgeable side of it, right? One thing a teacher has to be able to do, and you see this in any classroom setting, you start teaching and you just realize your lesson's not going where it needs to go. They're not with you. And to quote Friends, you suddenly have to pivot, and you've got to try and go in a different direction, right? Part of being a teacher is that ability. I think when it comes to knowledge, sometimes, especially when you're a new teacher at a new school and they look at you, and I don't care whether you're a private school, a public school, because I've got lots of friends in the public system, and they're like, I remember the time I was just told you're teaching this course starting in September, and I don't know anything about that course. You have to, part of being a teacher, and I think it's part of what keeps people in teaching and pushes people out of teaching, is this ability to be able to accept that sometimes I just need to stay 2 weeks or 3 weeks ahead of my students. I've got to know more than them right now, and a belief in yourself that I can know more than them. And when I get through teaching this the first time, it'll be a breeze after that. I've got it after that. I've been thinking about this because I knew you would hit on the knowledgeable one, because it's an important one, right? I think educators also struggle with believing what they know, if I can word it that way. And I might take my words back in a minute. But I think because we teach, we realize what we don't know. We realize there's just so much more than what we know in that instance, right?
Of course.
And so I think educators struggle with that some. They struggle with this idea that they've got to know it all the time. And I think educators need to give themselves a bit of a break and say, you know what, it's okay if I need to spend some extra time prepping for this lesson, because I just don't remember that like I should. And I need to just spend some time building my knowledge back up to the point that when I'm in front of my students, I know what I'm talking about and I'm good at it. Can I go a little bit further?
Please.
It goes back to what I said there about, my favorite teacher. I actually had three. I had three that were just so passionate about their topic. They just loved. I had a law teacher, I had a theology teacher, and I had a history teacher, and they were all just so passionate about their topic. And I think that carries through a lot, and that gets you a lot further than knowledge. I had some really bad teachers and professors. We've all had them, right? They knew their stuff, but knowledge isn't enough. It has to be there. You're the teacher, but it isn't enough, right? And
Right.
I think that's where this triangle comes in, because we value, okay, we hired you. We believe you can teach, right? We believe you know what you're going to talk about, but we value relationship above all the others at St. Jude's. If it's your weakest, we're okay with that, as long as we see nuggets of it, that you'll get there, that you will, because high school students learn from people they think care about them, that they believe care about them.
Right.
And when they believe that, they give an immense amount of grace. Just last week, I taught probably the worst class I've taught since I came to St. Jude's. Even when I walked out, I thought, what the heck was that? What just happened there, right? But not a student complained. I mean, maybe themselves, but nobody said anything. There was no rolling of eyes. There was none of that. Because we have a relationship, and the next day I went back in and said, okay, that might not have been the best class we've ever had together. Let's move on. Let's keep going. Let's keep learning. Right. So it's all a balancing act. And I think it's a willingness to acknowledge and accept it, really, that pushes teachers further than they would go otherwise.
I love what you're saying. I remember some days I go into the classroom, I have no idea what I'm talking about for some reason, right? I'm not prepared, or it was one of those lessons that I'm just not sort of convinced of, and the kids are like, man, okay, it's okay.
Yeah,
You'll do better tomorrow, no worries.
Well, and of course now we get to use the other option of, That is a fantastic question, Johnny. Why don't we all get our laptops out and Google that and see what the answer
Exactly.
to that question
That's
is,
right.
right?
That's right.
But yes, it can be tough, especially a day later, you know the answer, right?
Of course.
It
Right.
was just in the moment, you're like, where did that question come from? That wasn't in my lesson plan, right? So
Right. You said something. You said at St. Jude's, you value relationship building overall. Why?
mhm. Because we believe everything else will fall into place
Hmm.
if the relationship is there. Now, understand that assumes we hired you in the first place, right? Like there's a caveat here. There are some fantastic people out there that we would never hire as teachers because we don't think they could do the rest of it, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But I am blown away, year after year. One teacher that comes to mind, they know their stuff. They can teach their lessons. They're terrible at organization, but they're probably one of the favorite teachers in the upper school. There's actually
Hmm.
two of them that fall into that category where I'm just like, every year the kids just call them out and call them out. They're just such a fan because our head of school, sorry, our founder, he puts it to us often. Think of the teachers that you remember,
Hmm.
and now think of what exactly did they teach you? What knowledge exactly did they? You can't do it,
Right.
right?
Right.
You can't do it. And so what you remember though is that relationship or that passion or that just belief that if we just communicate this clearly enough, it will change your life and the world, right? So,
Yeah.
relationship is so vital.
I mean, I don't speak about her enough on the podcast, but my favorite teacher was a history and English teacher. So I had it twice, English and history.
Yeah.
As you said, I mean, I couldn't tell you like what we learned, what novels, what stories, but I remember those magic moments in class,
Yes.
right? I mean, if it was an activity, if it was a joke, she said, if it was just, just like yelling at me, calling me a name, like made everybody laugh. That's the magic moments I
Yes.
remember.
Yeah,
I miss Hurley, God bless
absolutely.
her.
Yeah, that's what it's about. I had a math teacher. Actually, I was trying to look up one of the teachers, my law teacher. I couldn't remember his name. I was trying to find it
Mm.
online. I had a grade 11 math teacher, and I just happened to notice his obituary came up when I was looking
Oh
for
no.
for
Mm.
teachers. And yeah, I mean, he lived a good long life, but I will never forget him because every student at some point in the year had their special day. Now, this was in the day of no PowerPoints. This was overhead projectors, and
Yes.
you wrote your
The
name on,
transparencies.
yes, the transparencies, and it would be, today is Steve's
Mhm.
special day, and he
Mhm.
had a card for you where he said something good about you
Oh
in it, right?
wow.
And I mean, he just blew most teachers out of the water when it came to his ability to connect with students. But I've never ever forgotten that.
Hmm.
That was something he did, and he also read Dr. Zeus stories all the time. So I don't know. We did learn math too, though. It was advanced
He was a
mathematics.
math teacher. Okay. That's funny.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, if you're meeting a new teacher for the first time, what advice would you give them going into class next semester?
I think I would say
Hmm.
figure out what you're good at, especially on this triangle. Figure out where your strength
Mhm.
is, play to your strength, and get a good team around you. Because that's what gets you through. I have this talk with our teachers each year during our August PD, because at our school we use a house system, much like
Mhm.
Harry Potter, only Greek letters. And I always take each of the teachers as a house off to the side and say, look, this is your house. When it all falls apart, these are the teachers you go to first. These are the ones that you get support from. They are here for you, and it was interesting. We did one a couple years ago where they played this whole yarn throwing game, and it created this huge web, which was the point.
Mhm.
And then I had each of them snip a piece of the yarn off and tie it onto their name tag that they wear around. And I said, just every time things are going bad in the classroom, look down and see that piece of yarn, and remember, you're not alone. There's a web of us out here. Get that team behind you, because that's what gets you through. And that it astounds me. In my office, there's three of us that share an office, and one will come in one day, and from the newest teacher in our office to the one who's taught the longest, and we'll just be there, and one of us will say, I don't know how to teach this point.
Mhm.
And we'll just set everything aside, and we'll brainstorm for 5 minutes. And usually we come out with a whole lesson we'd never thought of before, right?
Right.
Because that's what happens when you're with a team. And we really, it is part of our culture that we take very seriously, that we are a team. Nobody is doing this alone. And honestly, the teachers where I've kind of watched them, and they won't engage, they sit in their own corner, they do their own thing, they go teach, they go back to, they don't last. They last the year and we never see them again. And we're good with that. Thank you for finishing the year. That's one of our things. Never leave in the middle of a year. But the other thing is, if it's not for you, it's not for you. Go find what is for you. But St. Jude's, we're a team, and that's what we're all about. So
yeah, I love that.
yeah.
What is your biggest frustration as a teacher, as an educator?
So I'm only 4 years in, but I'm starting to see it now. 4 years was enough that I can start to see it. We are JK to 12, but I deal mainly 9 to 12, 7 and 8, 9 to 12. And the frustration I see is kids just not becoming what they could be, if they would apply themselves. It's seeing what they're capable of,
yes,
and seeing them just fall short from laziness, from whatever the reason is, seeing them not become what they could be. And the reason I say I'm starting to see is because I'm also starting to, I'm my first year of seeing the spectrum from 9, 10, 11, 12. And some of these kids that really in grade 9 and 10, you're like, oh my goodness, what are you doing? Right. And by grade 12, they've worked through some of those things. They're on their way to becoming really good adults. And I think the frustration is in dealing with that, but the antidote probably is remembering we've seen it before. We'll see it again, but the kids do get through it. And this whole idea of just not giving up on a kid just because they're just a pain, and that's all they are right now, but that's not all they will be, right? And we need to get them through those times, and learn to see the good of it. Today we had a conversation about a student at the school, and a concerning student who is causing more trouble than we like to see. And the conversation was wrapping up, and the owner was there, and we were all chatting, and the head of school, the owner, and myself were having a meeting, and we're talking about this kid, and in the end, though, he said something. So is this guy usually the one starting the problem? And we're like, yeah, usually he is. And he just smiled and said, okay, good. And we knew as soon as we saw this grin on his face, it was, this kid is going to do something. All we have to do is figure out how to direct them in the right way. And
he saw the leadership in the kid, right? Even though it is being used in a negative way, but it's there.
Yes. And it goes back to, not that we didn't plan this, but this is going to segue nicely. It goes all the way back to the beginning of, why do we not care about having an equilateral triangle? Because for every strength, there is a weakness. Somebody who is exceptionally relational is probably going to struggle organizationally. It's probably going to be because they care more about you than they do the paperwork. Right?
My mind is blown right now. That makes so much sense. Yes.
But this is the thing with the kids too, is their strengths are at this point going to be their weaknesses often, because even the exceptionally smart kids, their brilliance is their weakness right now, because they don't know how to do anything but that. In the case of this kid we were talking about, his leadership skills, his ability to drive things just needs to be harnessed. But right now it's his greatest weakness at the same time. Right. So, we're good with that. It also is one of those, you bang your head against the wall a lot.
It needs polishing a little bit, but he'll get there. Wow. That's fascinating. In your 4 years teaching, have you figured out how to motivate students who are just not interested?
What I would say to that, which I am quite certain there are lots of people who have studied this a long time who can give better answers than me, but I'll give you the one that I use, and I use it because when I came over, my buddy said, look, this is what you do if the class just isn't engaging, whether it's one student or the whole class, because sometimes it's the greater majority anyway. Stop teaching and tell them a story. Tell them a story about your life. Tell them something that they will engage with, because knowledge is so vital. It's so important, right? But it's just knowledge. It's just stuff. It's just numbers. It's just formulas. It's just, it's just all that. Sometimes they're just not engaging because they just don't see any purpose to any of it. Right. And as you learn to, go in windy paths rather than straight lines down your lesson, hopefully you find a way to draw it back in. If it's, if you're 10 minutes into an 80-minute class, you can't just tell a story for the next 70 minutes. You got to get back to teaching at some point. But I remember I did it last year with a bunch of my students. They were just not, they were DP students. And because of the way the exams worked and the way our schedule works in Ontario, they had to come back after their DP exams and do another unit because there was still more time in the school calendar, right? But they were checked out. They just didn't. And the first class they came back, naturally. And I thought, okay, yeah, this is not going well. And I was it's my favorite unit. It's a unit on the you want to be. And it's because I finally, after I get rid of all the DP stuff, I finally get to do something I like. So I get to, and so it's a leadership course, but it's a leadership from how do you recognize who you are to become who you want to be. And it just wasn't happening. So I'm like, all right, everybody's, put your phones away, close your laptops, put the textbooks away. I just want to tell you a story about when I was in college and I had to, and we just went on with it. And as soon as you say, okay, everybody stop, I just want to tell you a story. They get it.
Right.
They're back because you're finally going to tell them something they care about. Right. So, I that to me, it's just it's a thing. It's what I use. Other people might have better ones, but just stopping, and because it's about relationship and they can connect with a story about you. So yeah,
that's awesome. I mean, like you said, everybody has their technique, right? Everybody has their tactic. This works for you, then it works. Okay, Mr. Neal, I appreciate your time so very much. I'm going to have you back on because we do have a lot to talk about, even though your career is not very long, but my gosh, you are on the road to being legendary.
Oh, well, thank you for that, but it was a pleasure. Thanks for reaching out, and yeah, look forward to doing it again sometime.
I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
How eye-opening was that interview? I hope you learned a lot today, just as I did when I first heard him talk about the triangle of teaching. Remember to use your strengths, and that it's okay if you're not good at everything. That's what makes you so much better at other things. As much as I was utterly disorganized with the administrative side of teaching, I was also creative and passionate in the classroom and about my subjects. So don't try too hard. Just be you. Let me know what you thought about the conversation and leave your comments, questions, or complaints in the Legendary Educator Facebook group. You'll find the link in the show notes. You can follow me on Instagram at Legendary Educator, or you can get in touch with me at legendaryeducator.com. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, because that helps out a lot. Next week, we'll have another legendary episode with a different legendary educator. Class is dismissed.